is not perfect. I hope you guys actually wrote in your reflections. But I want to know, when have you allowed your perfectionism, or have you ever allowed perfectionism to stop you from moving forward, starting something, or owning a space?
Yes. So I'm a twin.
Oh.
Yes.
Mpoomy didn't know either.
A lot of people don't know this, but the thing about being a twin, and we're not identical, we're fraternal, is that it is the breeding ground for comparison. Like, people expect you to be the same in everything, to be interested in the same things. And so I just grew up being compared to my sister. She grew up being compared to me. And I had to be very deliberate about carving my own path. And I think part of that, burden of being a twin is wanting to be perfect. Because there's this stick, this measuring stick that you were born with, which is not her fault, which is not my fault. But that's something that has, made me feel like I had to be perfect. My sister has always been the left brain kind of person. She's a doctor. And I have always been the creative, right brain person. And I went into law school because I also wanted to do something that was, traditional. You're either becoming a doctor or a lawyer or an engineer. So I went to law school. And by the time I was in second year, I knew that I didn't want to be a lawyer. But I finished it. And I remember at my 21st birthday party, we had a party with my sister. And we had 2 cakes. The one cake had a gavel on it, and that was my cake. And her cake had a stethoscope on it, and it was like the pride of the family, we're doing these incredible things. But I knew that's not what I wanted, and I had to decide in my final year, when I had signed all the contracts to do my articles, that actually I'm a creative person, and I've always been a creative person. And it was this pursuit of the traditional, of what the world deems as perfect, that made me go to law school in the first place and finish a degree that I knew I didn't want. It didn't go to waste. I don't think anything goes to waste. So, when I try to explain to my family what I do, nobody understands it. It's public relations. But I'm so glad I had to give myself the permission as well to just be who I am. And I don't always know who that is, by the way. I don't always know what that means. I actually wanted to read a post that Instagram reminded me of a few weeks ago, right? And it's about beauty. So I wrote this in 2015, and I was writing it to the Anele of 2012. At the time, it was around my birthday. So I'm just gonna read it verbatim. To the Anele of 2012, from the Anele of 2015, a week away from your birthday, Chimamande Adichie says, beauty does not solve any problem. As is the tradition, I have been on my annual detox in the run-up to my birthday, one of which is a beauty detox. I was trying to reimagine what beauty is for me and focus on creating a deep sense of self-worth that is not linked in any way to how I look. I wanted to feel good about myself for the sake of feeling good. So I have deliberately been avoiding beauty in the past few weeks. I've avoided makeup, dressing up, magazines, and have taken up to reading and watching YouTube videos on beauty to understand really what does it mean to be beautiful. Beauty is a burdensome thing for me sometimes. More than that, it doesn't make me whole or even happy. We live complement to complement, and are always in need of our next fix of affirmation because compliments and likes are never enough and ever addictive. And I'm happy with this newfound freedom, and the knowledge of Christ's love for me is unwavering. And so when I spoke about that, I don't always know who the person is, but there's this inner knowing. Because this was 2015, before I had worked at Dove, before I had worked for a brand that champions inclusive beauty. But your spirit always knows. It always, always knows. And the things that you are seeking for are also looking for you. So I think for me, I've as soon as I left law school, I was like, okay, I don't have the answers. I'm just going to be open to what this next phase of my life is and let go of the perfectionism.
Sure, thank you for that. And I think a lot of us stay stuck in spaces where just because you're good at something doesn't mean you have to do it. And I mean, you passed in law school, but it wasn't your calling, so thank you. Zoraida, yours is on motherhood. You have two beautiful, one teenager, right? Two teenagers.
Yes, a 15-year-old and a nearly 14-year-old.
So you're in the thick of it. This chapter is my foot grew, where I share on the complexities of motherhood and how I try decenter the glamour of it. But I want to know, what are the things, I'm paraphrasing, what are the things that you had to let go of because of motherhood, and have you resolved?
Sure, powerful question. I'm going to share something that happened actually a few days ago in my home, because I know that we're in a safe space, right? I come from a tough upbringing where I really feel like I had to parent myself. By the time I was in high school, I was paying for my own school fees, buying my own school uniform, working, and so I've got this inner grit, this inner resilience, this inner hardness. But at the same time, I've been on my self-development journey for, I would say, my entire life. Yeah. Really my entire life, but more so in the last 30 years, so it's a long time. And so I consider myself a really conscious parent. I make conscious decisions, I'm intentional. And then this week, my daughter had a meltdown. So I go to her room reluctantly to go and speak to her. And I'm sitting on a chair in her bedroom and she's in her bed crying. And I say to her, so what do you want to talk about? Like really hard and aggressive. And she's like, you know, Mom, there was no reason for you to react that way, blah, blah, blah. And then I had this really internal out-of-body experience happen. I had my head saying to me, Zoraida, that is your daughter. She's crying. She's really stressed out in the middle of exams. That was your fault that you reacted that way. Go and hug her. And ladies, let me tell you, I could not get my body to move to go and hug her. I could not get soft because my mother never hugged me when I cried. I had to get over it. In fact, I was a girl that eventually started writing letters to my mother because she just wouldn't speak to me. So it was the only way I could communicate. So it's, when I think about my broadcasting career, I can completely understand that I went into radio so that I could communicate with millions of people, because my mother, my very own nucleus at home, wouldn't listen to me. And at that moment, I realized that I was my mother. And with great effort, really, really great effort, I got up from out of the chair and I went to go and hold her. But more so, I got really honest with her and I spoke to her about that moment that I had gone through where my head and my heart could not align to move towards her. It's like I wanted her to pay for what I went through when I was her age. And so it was such a vulnerable moment and such a beautiful moment between her and I, which I have no doubt she will remember, where I just went, parenting is sometimes about being the learner and your kids are the teacher. Yeah.
Love that. Analyze 63% of South African women, of which 35% are girls aged 10 to 17, struggle with mid to low levels of body esteem. 63% of women, I think I'm part of that 63%. And that 2 of 5 women globally, everywhere, would give up a year of their lives to achieve beauty standards. So out of 5 women, 2 would say, I'll give up my life just to have the waist, the skin, the hair, etc. That's how important we find beauty. I want to know, can you share how AI is contributing to this reality? I don't even want to use stats because it's reality, we're living in it. And what is Dove doing to combat this with the Real Beauty campaign?
So those are some scary figures.
Yeah.
And I can definitely relate. And I think for me, I want to say off the bat, you are beautiful.
Yeah.
You are beautiful. Please believe it. Please own it. And please say it to yourself often. Don't wait to hear it from somebody else. It's sad to me that young girls, right, we know that it's an issue for us as women in general, but 35% of young girls have low body self-esteem, and by the time you're an older woman, it's 63%. So what it tells me is that there's this confidence, there's this joy, there's this childlikeness that we have when we're younger that is eroded more and more the older you get, you know, because 63% and the fact that 2 out of 5 older women are wanting to give up their lives to achieve their beauty ideals, it means that there's something that we're not doing right, right? The pressure is getting worse as we grow up. And one of the things we have identified as Dove is obviously AI is a threat to women's confidence and real beauty standards. We know the filters, but even beyond the filters now, you can actually generate an image from scratch, which is becoming even more corrosive to beauty. And one of the things we have pledged as Dove is not to use AI to generate images of women. By 2026, it is predicted that most of the images you see online, even in adverts, will be AI-generated images. And if you've been following Dove over the years, we've always been about inclusive beauty, representation, and there's something that Thick Leonce Lesejo likes to say, and I've stolen this quote. She's one of our influencers on Dove, is you have to learn to live with the girl in the mirror. So it's not about not ever putting on makeup, not ever doing things that make you feel good and excited and that just embellish or enhance what is already there. It's about, Dove is saying that beauty needs to be inclusive. Why? Because you need to feel beautiful all the time. You can't wait for the face beat. You can't wait for the wedding day or the graduation. Dove is saying, let's live also with the girl in the mirror. So let's expand, what beauty is, what beauty means, which is why at 35, at a younger age, only 35% of girls are feeling low self-esteem, and they never put on makeup, right? They're always themselves, but they are more confident than we are, and that's a problem. We're not setting a good example. So I think for me, the challenge that I would make to everyone here and to us is, let's live with the girl in the mirror as well. Like, let's love the girl in the mirror.
I have a question. It's a safe space. Does anybody here take or post pictures on Instagram without a filter consistently?
How many I do.
Post without filters? How many would never post without a filter? How many don't post without filter themselves? There's honesty. Must ask the question again. How many here are confident enough to take a picture and post it on Instagram without putting a filter on? When was the last time you posted a picture without a filter or editing?
Oh, yesterday.
Years ago.
Someone said years ago. Yeah, that's the reality. I made a conscious decision to stop using filters, and it was so hard. And now what's dangerous, what I'm seeing is that parents are putting filters on babies. It's not out of judgment, it's out of concern. That those kids are going to look at those pictures and not recognize themselves. Zoraida, as someone who's been in the public space for over 25 years, I look at the Kardashians and how they've changed themselves so much. And as one who suffered a lot of bullying during pregnancy and how my face changed, I can understand how for them, who've had that global audience, why Khloe Kardashian changed her face so much time. So I have so much empathy. Now for you who started 25 years ago, how have you seen the definition of beauty change, and what do you think has been the driving force?
So I must say, when I was younger, there was definitely a stereotype of what was deemed beautiful. She was skinny, she was white, she had blue eyes, and she had long blonde hair. And I could not locate myself in her at all. So as a result, I didn't feel secure because I didn't look like her, aka Barbie. What's different right now, over the years and with my self-development work, I have begun to focus more on my inner beauty and my energy and my essence, because I think more and more that's what we're seeing in people now. The first thing we're seeing is what is their energy like? What is their spirit and essence like? What is their presence like? As opposed to, oh, I love those, I love what you've done with your eyes, or I love those lashes. It's become about what we're feeling around people. So that's been a journey for me. But what excites me most, and it has been going at an exponential rapid speed over the last few years, is the advent of social media. With the advent of social media, we have been seeing more women, younger generations going, not on my time. I will define beauty for myself. Beauty is diverse. The lens is no longer narrow, it is wide. And so that the landscape of media is changing, and for me, that is what is so exciting. I am optimistic about AI. I think just like the internet that has had many positives, I think AI can be positive too in terms of beauty, and that's where Dove comes in, is that we have the opportunity to, this is machine learning, we have the opportunity to teach the machine what beauty looks like. And it's going to be so diverse. And so I'm excited about where we are right now.
I love that. Do you think as a woman, we go through phases where, like right now I'm seeing my daughter, she's in her very confident phase, and then we go through a phase of dipping in teenagehood, and I think in our 20s, 30s, we suffer with our self-esteem. And then I see women in their 40s and 50s, and the confidence is just, do you think it's like a wave? Is it an age thing? Or do you think the power is with us?
What a powerful question. I love that. Thank you. I definitely think we're journeying all the time, especially when we are conscious. But I have to say that I'm going to be 50 next year, and as I get older, you just give less Fs. You really, really do. It's like you become so anchored in your spirit and so anchored in yourself. And so for me, it's more about what is my purpose? What is my purpose? What am I here for? And how am I going to be impactful? So the perspective changes from that beauty perspective to what am I here to do? And you speak a lot about fulfilling the purpose, the assignment that God wants for you. That's kind of like where I'm delving more and more into, and it is so powerful.
We can see it. We can see it.
I hope I look like you.
Right, me too.
Thank you.
Anele, I've been fortunate to be part of the Dove Self-Esteem Project for the last 2 years, and every time I go there, we go to schools. We visit schools that are less privileged, and we talk to the kids there, and the joy is just amazing. But I've seen how the room changes from when we start the conversation, so it's like, but then I think one of the missions and how you've chosen so well the partners is that we see these kids and we affirm them, and by the end of the day, some who would never speak in front of people get to speak, and they get to understand their feelings, understand themselves a little better, and they find confidence. And I love this time, some would say even the wrong answers, but you see how the room has changed from the kids, that they start supporting even the less confident ones, moving from, we laugh at them because they made a mistake, to, oh man, we in it together. What impact has this project had on South Africa? And what do you think like a 13-year-old who's had that experience will be like at 18?
Sure. So when I'm actually going to draw for myself, right? So when I was in high school, I used to do a lot of public speaking, a lot of debating, and that was affirmed in me. And I think a lot of the time with Black children, especially in underprivileged schools, there's no opportunity to debate.
Yeah.
So you can never oppose a view. It's not something that is embraced, that is affirmed. And you know, when you go to an X-Model C school, they actually want you to be opposing, right? You practice being proposition and then opposition, and you learn negotiation, you learn how to table a view and how to persuade people, because not everyone is going to believe what you believe, but you're learning actually soft skills, right? And this actually reminds me of this debate that was happening on social media with somebody famous, and she was saying, where are we now? Gen Z doesn't have, you know, the necessary skills to be employable. And some of it is just these soft skills that we are learning in school that you are not paying attention to. So for me, the Dove Self-Esteem Project, as to your point, it's beyond going in and giving confidence tools, which is important, but it's also giving someone a platform to speak, to be on a stage, to be heard, to be seen, and that's something that you take for granted. You know, my debating and public speaking skills at 17 took me all the way to New York. I was able to represent South Africa for a thing at the time that was called Model United Nations. So you would pretend to be a country and you would have 3 other 17-year-olds in your team, and you are at the United Nations Assembly and you're debating something serious. You have to research on, you know, the war that's happening in the Congo and what is your country's view on that, you know, and those are all things that you think, okay, everybody has these opportunities, everybody does this. But I think whenever we've had people come to school, when I was a 13-year-old, to the question that you ask, how does that then transform someone's life, that at 18 they feel like they can have a purpose and a life worth having, is that for me, it made me feel like, wow, okay, if speaking that was the first time I left the country, can get me on a plane when my mother's never been on a plane, and can bring me into New York City. Can you imagine all the things that, you know, this gift can actually open up for me? And you need to be seen. And someone has to see that in you. And that's why we need to have the Dove Self-Esteem Project and go into the schools and have Mpoomy Ledwaba, so that the little 13-year-old can actually see herself in you and say, hey, I can do that. Oh, okay, so this is how she did it, you know, because you're also sharing part of your journey. And it's sad that we are in a time where the economy is in huge crisis, and it's getting more and more harder to invest into these sorts of programs. So I think having partners that believe in what we're doing, such as Zureda, such as Mpoomy, who, you know, we can say, hey, we need you to help us, we need you to partner with us, so we can actually continue to drive this impact. I want to thank you guys as well for partnering with Dove.
I love what you mentioned, and when I was about 11 years old, my mom's friend was working at with Celsi. I think it was the time when Celsi was Take a Girl Child to work. And I was the youngest in the group. I only went because of my mom's friend. But I just remember going into the offices, but none of my parents are in the corporate space, going into the offices and seeing women who look like me. And I think we underestimate what that means. And I've always had this idea in my head that I think each one should adopt a child, not necessarily bringing them in your home, but just to invest yourself in just a child who needs to see someone who sees them. Because literally outside of all the accomplishments, the things, kids just want to be seen, for you to go down and say, how are you? What's your name? What are you like? Some kids don't get that. So thank you for giving us the opportunity to do that. Zureda, a big part of my work, the common question is, Mpoomy, how did you build confidence? You'd be amazed. And these are people with MBAs and doing in leadership positions. In fact, I was at a retreat with women more or less your age, and I was speaking. And the confidence to stand up and speak, like you said, Anele, I took for granted. That is not something everybody has, right? And so we all have some level of self-esteem, but also there's the issue of now you can no longer present yourself or perform well in your gifting because of self-confidence or low self-esteem. What are practical ways every day that we can start to build up our self-esteem and our self-confidence?
Beautiful question. I know this sounds so cheesy, but it's the way Mpoomy started off her book, with gratitude. It really, gratitude, I mean, there's studies around that right now. Gratitude is so powerful. And the moment you go into a state of gratitude, the first thing in the morning, is that it's not just words and it's not just thoughts, but there's a chemical reaction that happens in your brain. When you become grateful, your brain starts releasing neurotransmitters like dopamine, serotonin, neuroepinephrine, what is the other bliss chemical? Oxytocin. We release all those chemicals, and when you start your day with those chemicals, That is called confidence. That is called high self-esteem. That is called feeling settled. So I really do encourage people to start with gratitude, because when we start with gratitude, we're considering what we do have as opposed to what we don't have. Mm-hmm. Another thing, they say comparison is the thief of joy, which it is. But the real truth is that we are comparing ourselves every single minute of the day to someone else. And so I heard this on a podcast recently and I really loved it. The lady called it, we all suffer from comparisonitis. And when you go through comparisonitis, instead of being envious or jealous over that person, rather go, if she can do it, so can I. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And then I want to leave you with this, which is the power of our thoughts. Did you know that we have between 70 and 80,000 thoughts every single day? 70 and 80,000 thoughts every single day. Men have half of that. Right? Men have half of that. So we are thinking all the time. But here's the crazy thing.
Because they outsource their thinking.
Exactly. The crazy thing is that 90% of those thoughts we think the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day, which means we are living in the past. Ooh. Because we're never thinking about new thoughts. So if we're thinking about what we don't have all the time, we're living in the past. So if you want to change that, if you want to elevate, if you want to go to the next level of your life, you have to change your mindset. Let it start with gratitude. Become aware of your thoughts. If your thoughts are negative, that's okay. Just shift it, go into gratitude, and you keep doing that over a period of time. This is what you get.
So we don't need a new wardrobe.
No.
We don't need to spend money to feel confident. I love that you mentioned.
It's all inside.
It's all inside. Ladies, my closing question is one of my dreams and hopes for this book, and I try to write it in everyone's book as a message, is that I hope you walk in your authentic power. What does authentic power feel like to you, Anele, and what does it look like in the season of your life and the roles that you play? And the same question for you, Zareda.
So there's this quote by Dolly Parton that I love. It's find out who you are and then do it on purpose.
Okay.
And for me, that is authentic living. Yeah. I need space to find out who I am. Mm-hmm. And then I need space to embody that. Because the first time I was doing it, it was a fluke. I wasn't sure. But now I'm embodying it because it feels good. And I always say it's kind of like, going into Zara, picking out the items. Maybe they looked good on the hanger. And then I try them on and it's like, these bums were not made for. And then you put it back and then you pick out something else and you try it on and it's like, this is exactly what I imagined it to be in my head. Yeah. Now I get to embody it. It's in reality. So for me, that's authentic living. And all I ask really is to just be given the space to at least try out don't judge me for putting it on.
Yeah,
but I just want to see what it will look like. And then if it doesn't feel good, if it doesn't look good, then I'll put something else on.
I love that. And before I move on to you, I love how you said that, because I think we look at people who are authentic and we think they just got it. But I'm sure they tried other people's personalities and tried other people's dreams and until they find their thing. But I think I love the word you use, the space to try on and decide to say, okay, no, not for me. Put it back until you find your own thing. Zareda?
I love that. For me, I have to say that authenticity is something that I'm constantly chasing. I don't think it's a place that you really get to, because I think as a curious human being, I'm forever evolving and changing, and something that I may have connected with and been aligned with 5 years ago, I'm not aligned with today. So I'm constantly chasing authenticity. I find I love social media, and in the social media space, I find that when I show up as my most authentic, vulnerable self, those posts get the most engagement. And it goes back to permission. When we allow ourselves permission to be, we allow others permission to see themselves in us. So it's something that I'm constantly moving towards, and it's exciting.
You remind me of something I listened to this morning where the lady was asked about calling, like, do we all have a calling? Is our calling the same? And she said, well, I think it changes, like what you said about authenticity, right? Because you're a curious human being. And she said, sometimes you're called into something and sometimes you're called out of it. And we tend to miss the part of being called out of something we were once called into. So I love that authenticity is not stagnant. We keep evolving, we keep growing, and we keep being curious about life. Last question. Anele, there's a lot of products on the shelf. And I think a lot of the brands are putting in the work. They're doing the science. The results are there. Why should we pick up a Dove product in the broader picture, and to keep in mind the work that you do and how the funding is needed? Why do these ladies